my name's Chris, and today we're going to cover off stairs. Love them or loathe them, they're often part of the trail running scene, and what we're going to talk about today is a few little things to consider, give you a little bit more understanding about the steps, so when you do come across them you feel a little bit more confident and are a little bit more prepared to tackle them and get to the top and to the ultimate goal of finishing your trail race or run, whatever that may be. So the stairs themselves, often we do loathe them, and when we come across them, they are a little draining in terms of the anticipated physical exertion we're going to have to put in to actually get from here to up the top. Now, why are stairs here? Well, stairs are often in place because the terrain itself is too steep to be able to traverse it easily without them. So in that sense, they actually provide a greater platform and a more accessible platform to people to actually traverse up a gradient. So from that perspective, they're great. You don't have to actually work as hard potentially as if the terrain didn't have them. Secondly, they're there for erosion and safety perspectives, but ultimately what we're going to talk about is the fact that they're here because of the gradient that's involved. One thing to consider with the steps, especially on trails, is there's often not uniformity in the steps as there might be in a stairwell in the city building. When we're actually running and moving with a stair, this lip creates a little extra obstacle for us to need to overcome. And that requires us to actually lift our leg a little higher, keep our toe up a little higher so that we can move over it. And again, the height that we need to lift our leg varies depending on the step height. So one thing to consider with preparing yourself for stairs is actually strengthening these muscles. Often when we're considering preparing ourselves for a stair race, if we know that, or a race that stairs are involved, we're working through our calves, our hamstrings, our glutes and our quads as the predominant muscles to propel us up. But one thing that we generally forget is the anterior chain in our hip flexors and the muscles that actually lift our foot up. So we're going to talk a little bit later, or potentially in another video, about some exercises that can help these areas to ensure that we give ourselves the best chance to be able to overcome the steps and therefore propel ourselves up. So not considering the handrail or poles at this stage, I'm going to talk about how we can actually move along the steps with just how we actually move through our feet. So there's two ways to really consider. One, we can continue moving up the steps on our toes, which puts a lot of force and requires a lot of muscular work through our calves. But if we get to the point where they are actually fatiguing or you get that burning sensation, we can actually just use our flat feet, which changes the way the force actually goes through our body, and using flat feet engages our quads and our glutes a little bit more. So running on our feet might look something like this, just nice quick feet on our toes. But again, if our calves start to burn, similar to the principles that we've spoken about with the inclusion of power hiking, is actually taking away the pressure through our toes and focusing more on pressure through our heels, and then just up the stairs on flat feet. So you can actually find a nice relief by changing your technique slightly, because it changes the way the muscles actually have to work, and bigger muscles like our glutes need to function when we've actually got a flatter foot. So you can change that up as you traverse through the stairs. You might start off on your toes, then when you start to fatigue, go to flat feet, and then alternate whatever makes you feel as comfortable. So another aspect to consider when actually climbing or running upstairs is whether or not we use poles. Now, I mentioned right at the start that stairs actually create a more stable platform for us to actually push off and make it more accessible. So generally when we're looking at stairs, there's more of a clearer space and there's a flatter platform to use, which is where poles can actually come into play quite effectively. So depending on your technique, how you like to do it, whether it's one pole at a time or two at a time, coming up the stairs and using your arms to help propel you up the stairs can be a really good way to take some of the pressure off the feet. And with using the poles, again, we can still alternate between whether we go toe off or whether we use our flat feet. But poles can be a really good addition if you're carrying them with you to be able to make climbing the stairs a little easier. So if you're coming across stairs and there's actually handrails here available for you to use, I'm going to show you two techniques that you can consider that can also contribute to making traversing the stairs a little easier. Now, back in the stair climbing days, my training partner, Adam Ryan, and I, we did a couple of little experiments when we were in the stairwells, and we would utilize the handrails and see how much benefit they actually gave us. So this isn't scientifically proven, this is just practical based evidence, but when we used the handrail, we actually improved our time climbing stairs by about 30%. So again, I'm not going to guarantee that handrails are going to give you a 30% improvement on your time up them, but using them can certainly take a lot of the load off the lower body and put that through the upper body that maybe has become fatigued because of the duration that we've been running for. So let's go through those two techniques. Now in this case, we've got handrail on either side. So we can use both our hands, providing they're free. And as we're coming up the stairs, we can either stay on our toes with that previous technique that I gave and use the handrails to pull up the stairs, or we can stay on our flat foot, the same sort of thing, whatever's most comfortable for you. So the second technique we can use in terms of utilizing the handrail is actually just choosing one side. Now, in this case, like I said, we've got one on either side, but you might come across stairs that only have it on the right-hand side. So again, using both hands and just using a pulling action. Here I'm traversing on my toes, or we can slow it down and use the flat foot technique. But again, just using both hands to pull us up. Just focusing on the step in front of you. So rather than looking up and seeing how far you've still got to go, like we do with trail running, only looking at 3 or 4 steps ahead to make sure we've got the right footing, when we're on the steps is literally just looking at the step in front of us. So as we're coming up, whether we're going nice and slow or we're running, looking at the step, not only to reduce the magnitude of the stairs, but also to make sure we're paying attention to our foot position, because when we're looking up here, we can't see what our leg's doing. We can't see if we're actually going to get over the lip of this step. Because again, one thing with trail running stairs is the uniformity is all different. So just to recap, we've gone through a few techniques to be able to make our traversing of the stairs a little easier. So whether that's pushing off on our toes, or if our calves become fatigued, pushing off on a flat foot to engage the glutes a little more. We've spoken about using poles if we have them available, or if not poles, you may have seen in some of the footage where I've actually used my hands to push against my leg to take some of the load off the feet and the legs and put it into the upper body, so that can help. We've also spoken about the handrail and whether they're available, whether on one side or both sides, to again incorporate the upper body to take some of the load off the legs to reduce that fatigue. But ultimately, you can chop and change any of those throughout any of the stairs that you climb. You can start off in one technique, move to the other to make sure you're as comfortable as possible. Ultimately, we want to try and create as great a rhythm as possible. So to be efficient moving across ground, whether that's flat or up on a gradient, rhythm and timing is the key for efficiency. Now, unfortunately, with stairs and their differences in heights and positions, rhythm is really hard to obtain, and therefore it affects our timing. But incorporating the techniques that we've just gone through can actually help build some rhythm, and you'll find what naturally comes to you. And then ultimately, once you get that down pat, the timing aspect will take care of itself. And while the stairs won't get any easier, you'll find that you'll actually traverse and get to the top a lot quicker.